Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Great to be back here again. Really to reacquaint you with Centaurus and what we've been doing. There's probably been a fair bit of change in the company over the last little while. The assets that we now have in the northern part of Brazil have set us up very well for where we wanted to be going in Brazil. And we really are in a world where we're exploring the land of the giants. The Carajás, it's our main geographical focus, and we have a number of projects there, but it is a world-class province, and it's something that we're very pleased that we've been able to get into. So we'll talk through that today. We'll talk through our projects. We've had some recent success with the exploration work that we've been doing, and hopefully the investment proposition that you see there will make sense to you by the end of this presentation. So we're a company now that holds projects in Tier 1 asset location. The Carajás is really one of the best mineral provinces in the world. There's a host of very large deposits. We have a nickel cobalt project called Itapetanga, which we're drilling at the moment. We have some copper gold assets in the form of Salobo West and Pebas, and we be looking to explore those through the course of this year. We've got a pretty decent cash position which will allow us to get on and do the exploration work. The shareholder base is quite broad at the moment, but management have a lot of skin in the game. We're very happy to have our position. Our exploration manager, Roger Fitzharding, is here today. He'll be at the booth afterwards if you have any more technical questions for him. But overall, I think Centaurus is well placed to really take the next leap forward. So Brazil, we've been there a long time now. We're 10 years in nearly. Started life in iron ore. Obviously that's not a commodity that everyone wants to be invested in, so we've had to change our stripes a little bit. We think that we've done that very well. We made a conscious decision to stay in Brazil. We've got a lot of experience there. We've got the team of people on the ground. There's a lot of competition in Australia and other jurisdictions. But in sort of the bigger picture side of things, Brazil is really coming out of a downturn. You're seeing interest rates down, inflation's down, growth's on the rise. They've made a number of sort of reforms in the country which have been very positive. And fundamentally, there is huge mineral endowment in the country where you actually have a very stable tenement system. So overall, great place to be operating, very pleased to be there. So looking at our projects, you can see the tenements marked in red, 3 projects, all in the Carajás. And I don't know whether people have really taken the time to look at the Carajás holistically. We talk about the Pilbara and it's such a great province, and it really is, but when you go into Brazil, the Carajás mineral province is just the place where you really want to be. So right next door to us at Salobo West, we have Vale has a very big copper gold mine called Salobo. It's 1 billion tonnes. They produce 200,000 tonnes of copper, 350,000 ounces of gold. That's just an example of the scale that we're talking about there. It also hosts the S11D iron ore project. It's 4.5 billion tonnes at 66% iron content. These are serious mines, and so when you're actually going out there exploring, you want to be in these best locations, and we've certainly got that here. The Itapetanga project, which I'll talk through now, it's a project that we picked up in January this year, and since that period of time we've actually done a hell of a lot of work to get it to the stage that it's at with recent drill success. So you're dealing in open pasture land, very easy to explore. It's over in the western part of the Carajás. But the big reason why we picked up this ground is that it was right along strike from an Anglo-American deposit called Jacaré. Jacaré is 300 million tonnes, it's 1.2% nickel, it's 0.13% cobalt. So for a large tonnage nickel cobalt play, they are exceptionally high grades. These structures that you have through there, you can see it in the magnetics. Our ground on the southern end of this belt runs down from Jacaré, the Anglo-American ground, through Vale ground into where we are. So we've done a very cheap entry into this with a private vendor in this area, and we've really, I guess, the belief that we have of what was going to be there has shown up in the recent exploration work. So we started out when we acquired this project in late January. We went out and did soil sampling. We went out and did some auger drilling, and the auger drilling really just tests the surface expression of this mineralisation. It's quite visual. It's a rich red lateritic soil. The geologists can get their eye in relatively easy. The deposits through there are very homogeneous. So, what we knew was at Jacare, we were expecting to find on our ground. When we did the auger drilling work, we saw that, and we defined a zone in what we call the northern target of sort of 3.5 kilometres. And in the southern area, we've defined an area that looks like about 2 kilometres long. More recently, I have identified some new areas, and I'll talk through those in a sec. On the back of all of that auger work, which was really defined the outline of where we want to be drilling, we've taken in the RC rig. That started sort of, I think, going back early May. Where are we? May? Yeah, early May. And I guess since that period of time, we had some results out yesterday. For the first 15 holes, we're seeing very good width of mineralisation, sort of nickel grades around 1%, good cobalt grades across that very sort of wider mineralised zone, depths up to 24 metres in the initial phase of work, and that's really just on the southern end of the northern target. We're progressively working our way north on the northern target, and then we'll come back to the southern target area. These laterites are very flat lying, they're very shallow. The mineralisation is starting at surface, relatively easy to drill, so you can take the drill rig down to 20, 30, 40 metres depending on how deep that mineralisation goes. But we're really seeing the high-grade cobalt mineralisation from surface. So you can see those intersections there. We're talking sort of 10-metre wide zones that are sort of running between 0.15 and 0.2% cobalt, which is very high grade for these sort of deposits. You're not going to see that too often. So we do expect that as we drill this thing out, we will find this high-grade cobalt zone that exists in Jacare. So coming back to that deposit, it had an average grade of cobalt around 0.13%, but they've got a high-grade core in there on the cobalt side that's running around 0.18%. So very pleasing, very good head start for us. I think this project's going to shape up well. The southern target, we haven't drilled there yet. As I said, we sort of should be progressing through there by mid-June. The auger work that we did originally showed that there was probably 5 to 8 metres of cover, and then we're sort of heading into the top of the mineralised zone. The auger was finishing in mineralisation, again, still seeing decent grades. So we made the decision at that point in time, rather than using these manual auger rigs to try to get through this cover, we'll just do that drilling with the RC rig, and that work's pending. As I alluded to earlier, there's a couple of new targets out to the west. There's a zone there that we need to test, and the southern extension, it sort of looks like there's something more there. Part of this is we've just come out of a wet season in Brazil. A lot of this area is still very damp, very hard to access in as far as getting a RC rig in there. We need it to dry out probably another month, and that's when we'll be able to get across to the western zone and the southern extension. So that's Itabatanga. It's a fantastic project. We're really at the start of it. I'll pull this together at the end, but from where we see it right now, with the market capitalisation that we've got compared to other peers that are existing in the space, in the nickel cobalt laterite space, we think there's plenty of upside just on that project alone. When the RC rig finishes at Itabatanga, our intention is to take it to our Pebis project. So Pebis, sorry, go back. So Pebis is located just on the outskirts of the major regional town centre there called Pabra Pebis. That's about 150,000 people. The area that we're looking at is in farmland. It's relatively easy to access. It was worked by a TSX company back in 2010, group called INV Metals. They did some soil sampling, they did some geophysical work, they did some limited drilling and identified some wide zones of copper mineralisation. So you can see there sort of 140 odd metres at 0.2% copper, 105 metres at 0.23% copper. Those intersections need to be followed up in their own right. Obviously they don't look to be economic right there, but what INV did do is that identified potentially a fault zone coming through which hasn't been tested, and that's the thing that we need to do with the RC drilling. If you take a look at Avanco, which is another ASX listed company. They've just been taken over by Oz Minerals. Their main operating mine there in this Carajás region, about 20 kilometres from the Pebbles project, is a 2.5% copper grade project that is only 60 metres wide and about 700 metres long. It's quite narrow, so it gives us every confidence to believe that between these sort of 300 to 400 metre wide holes that we could make a discovery in that area. So our strategy here is to go in, try to find a high grade deposit targeting this fault related IOCG target. Outside of that main zone, which you can sort of see on the bottom right map, sort of at the centre of the page, that's the main zone that we'll be targeting where we believe that fault zone is. There's a couple of other targets that recent soil sampling has identified. We'll go, when we've got the drill rig there, we'll do the testing of that area as well. So then coming back to Salobo West. Salobo West is the two tenements in the red, sitting in the top centre of the map. As I say, it's about 10 kilometres along strike from the massive Salobo mine operated by Vale. Those sort of tonnages that I alluded to earlier, they'll be doing that for the next 50 years there. This is a seriously big mine. When you look at our ground, it was granted, the northern tenement was granted to us in June last year. The southern tenement was granted to us in November last year. So we've really only just got started with the work that we need to do. The back half of 2017, it was all about collating the data that we could on previous work, which was predominantly done by Anglo-American. But when you look at this area, you're targeting these big IOCG deposits. So what you want to be is in what they call the Itacaiana supergroup. And it's the dark green that underlays that light green. And the light green, that's Vale. So they've dominated this area for years. It's been very hard to get a foothold in this region, and to have a project that sits in the Itacaiana supergroup and within the Cinzento shear zone, which hosts all of the largest IOCG deposits, is a huge coup for Centaurus. So I guess we're really spoilt because we've actually got data. It saved us a lot of money in the exploration, and we've now got to analyse that, work out where the drill targets are and what we need to do. And that's sort of ongoing work right now. It's a little bit hard to see on that map, but all of the deposits in that region you can tie into the magnetics. When you look at Salobo, as say 1 billion tonnes, Paulo Alfonso 300 million tonnes, Furnace 500 million tonnes. So these are very serious deposits, all sitting on the magnetic structures that run through, and you can see just through here, that's the Salobo, and this structure runs up through to this east-west banded iron formation in our tenement. And that's sort of the convergence of that. Those two regional structures is one of the key areas that we're targeting with drilling. The data here, it's Anglo-American data. They've done soils, they've done a lot of geophysical stuff, magnetics, VTEM, they've done some IP survey work. And I just want to leave you with sort of one example of why we like this area so much and the nature of the drill targets that we have. So this is, their geophysical. The top map's the mag, the bottom map's the VTEM. You can't quite see it, but there's a drill hole that went in here. It was the last drill hole that Anglo-American ever put into the project before they lost the ground back in 2010. They were targeting this large IP anomaly, which could well represent disseminated sulfides, coincident with soils at surface, coincident with the mag signature. They got that hole down to about 130 metres. Into the wet season, they pulled up that hole. They wouldn't have had the assay results at that point in time. Didn't get to their target zone into this IP anomaly. And at the bottom of the hole, they've hit copper, gold, and iron ore mineralisation, all the markers for an IOCG deposit. So for us, these are sort of ready-made targets that we can come in, test with drilling, and hopefully make it a serious discovery in this area. We've got the ability to work that ground from a non-ground disturbing point of view. We're still working with the relevant agencies to try to get the drilling licence to do the work that we need. When the work at Itapatanga and then Pebbles is finished, the team will come back to Salobo West, if we're not able to access the ground for drilling at that point in time, we'll get back in and be doing more non-ground disturbing work. There's plenty of work that still needs to be done. So we're in a position where we've got some great assets and a great country. We've got an active exploration program. We've got the cash in the bank to be able to do the exploration that we want. We've got a market cap of about $35 million. And if you look at the relative valuations to some of the peers, and there's some independent research on our booth, you can sort of see the upside potential that still exists in Centaurus. So I'd encourage you to take another look at it. We're a little bit of a different beast to what we were before, when some of you may have heard the story. So take a look. We're at the booth. If you've got any more questions, happy to take them at that point. Thank you.